The kitchens of Blackthorn Hold were always warm, even in the coldest months, and Alira Sokolova had long ago decided that warmth was the safest place in the world. She had lived within the stone walls of the castle since she was a small child, brought in after her parents died in a fever that swept through the lower village. No one told her much about them. No one asked much about her. She grew up quietly, learning to carry trays without spilling them, to fold linens without wrinkling them, and to walk through the halls of the palace as though she were made of air. By the time she turned 22, Alira had perfected the art of being unseen. She moved through the corridors with her eyes lowered and her steps soft, never lingering long enough to draw attention. The nobles who passed her barely noticed she existed. The guards nodded without truly looking. Even the other servants, who liked her well enough, often forgot she was in the room until she spoke. It was not a lonely life, exactly. It was simply a small one, and Alira had made peace with that a long time ago. The one person she never grew used to seeing, even after years of delivering meals to his private study, was the king himself. Alpha King Ronan Vasilievich ruled Blackthorn Hold with a strength that made even seasoned warriors lower their eyes. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried himself with the kind of quiet authority that needed no raised voice to command a room. His eyes were a deep amber that seemed to catch firelight even when none was near, a mark of the wolf that lived beneath his skin. He had inherited the throne young, after his father died in a border skirmish, and in the years since, he had built a reputation as a fair but distant ruler. Fair to his people, distant from everyone else. There was a reason for that distance, one whispered about in hallways but never spoken directly to him. His wolf had never chosen a mate. For shifters, this was no small matter. A king without a true mate was seen as incomplete, his rule considered unstable by the old laws that governed the packs. Ronan's advisors pushed candidate after candidate before him, daughters of noble houses, warriors from allied packs, women of beauty and standing from every corner of the kingdom. Each time, his wolf remained silent. No pull, no recognition, only a restless, gnawing frustration that grew sharper with every rejection, until even Ronan himself began to wonder if something inside him was broken. He did not speak of this to anyone. He carried it the way he carried everything, alone, behind a closed door, in a study lit by a single lamp long after the rest of the castle had gone to sleep. It was on one such night that Alira's world changed. She had been sent to deliver a late tray to the king's study, a task she had performed dozens of times before without incident. The halls were empty at that hour, the torches burned low, and her footsteps echoed softly against the stone. She balanced the tray with practiced ease, her mind wandering to nothing in particular, the way it always did during these quiet errands. She did not expect to find the study door already open. She did not expect to hear voices inside, low and sharp, speaking in a tone that made the hair on her arms rise. Alira paused just outside the doorway, tray still in her hands, uncertain whether to knock or retreat. Through the gap in the door, she saw three figures she did not recognize, dressed in dark travel clothes, standing near the king's desk. Ronan stood facing them, his posture tense, one hand resting near the blade at his belt. The air in the room felt wrong, heavy with a kind of tension that had nothing to do with politics. She realized, with a cold jolt of understanding, that these were not guests. They were intruders. Before she could decide what to do, one of the strangers moved, fast and sudden, lunging toward the king with a blade drawn from his sleeve. Alira did not remember deciding to act. Her body simply moved, the tray clattering to the floor as she threw herself forward, colliding with the attacker's arm hard enough to send the blade skittering across the stone. Everything after that happened in a blur. Shouts rang out. Guards, alerted by the noise, poured into the room. The intruders fought briefly and fiercely before two were subdued, and one fled through the window into the night. Alira found herself pressed against the wall, her heart hammering, her hands trembling from the strength she had not known she possessed until that exact moment. It was only when the chaos settled, when the guards dragged the captured men away, and the study fell into a strange, ringing silence, that Alira became aware of the king standing directly in front of her. Ronan was staring at her, the way a man might stare at something he could not explain. His breathing was uneven, Not from the fight, but from something else entirely. His amber eyes had darkened, the wolf just beneath the surface, and Alira felt a chill run through her that had nothing to do with fear. "Your Majesty," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Are you hurt?" He did not answer at first. He simply looked at her, as though seeing her for the very first time, though she had walked these halls in his presence for years. Something in his expression shifted, softened, then hardened again, as though he were fighting against a current pulling him somewhere he did not wish to go. "Your name," he said finally, his voice rough. "Tell me your name." "Alira," she said. "Alira Sokolova, Your Majesty. I work in the kitchens." He said nothing more that night. He simply nodded once, sharply, and turned away, leaving her standing amid the wreckage of the fallen tray, her heart still racing for reasons she could not fully name. In the days that followed, everything in Alira's quiet, small life began to unravel. She was summoned to the king's study again, this time not to deliver food, but to answer questions. Ronan sat across from her, his manner formal and controlled, though his eyes betrayed something restless beneath the surface. He asked about her past, her parents, where she had come from before the castle took her in. Alira answered as honestly as she could, though her own knowledge of her history was thin, pieced together from fragments and half-remembered stories. She did not understand at first why the king of Blackthorn Hold would care so much about a servant girl's childhood. It was only when she noticed the way his jaw tightened whenever she stepped too close, the way his eyes tracked her every movement with an intensity that made her skin warm, that she began to suspect something she did not dare name. The whispers started soon after. Servants who had once overlooked her now watched her with curious, sidelong glances. Guards who had barely acknowledged her began greeting her by name. Alira felt the shift in the air around her, the way attention gathered where it had never gathered before, and it frightened her more than the assassins ever had. She tried at first to retreat back into her old invisibility. She took on extra kitchen duties, avoided the halls near the king's study, kept her eyes lowered even more carefully than before. But the castle was too small, and fate, it seemed, was not finished with her yet. She encountered Ronan again in the garden one evening, when she had slipped outside for a rare moment of quiet air. He was there already, standing near the stone fountain, his shoulders tense, his expression unreadable in the fading light. When he saw her, something in him seemed to still. "You've been avoiding me," he said, not unkindly, but with a directness that startled her. "I did not think it was my place to do otherwise, Your Majesty," she replied carefully. He studied her for a long moment, and then, in a voice quieter than she had ever heard him use, he said, "My wolf has never chosen anyone. Not once, in all the years I have searched. I believed, truly, that something in me was incapable of it." He paused, his throat working. "Since the night in my study, I have not had a single moment of peace. My wolf will not settle. It watches for you. It listens for you. It knows you before I do." Alira's breath caught. She understood, then, what he was trying to tell her, though the truth of it felt too large and too impossible to hold. "I am no one, Your Majesty," she said softly. "A servant. No family name worth speaking of. Surely your wolf is mistaken." "My wolf does not make mistakes," Ronan said, and there was something almost pleading in his voice, a vulnerability she had never imagined from a man so powerful. "I have fought this recognition since the moment it happened, because it makes no sense to me. But fighting it has changed nothing. If anything, it has only grown stronger." Neither of them spoke for a long moment. The fountain trickled quietly beside them, and somewhere above, the first stars began to appear. "I do not know what to do with this," Alira admitted finally, her voice trembling. "I never imagined my life would include anything like this. I was content to be forgotten." "I do not want to forget you," Ronan said. "I could not, even if I tried." In the weeks that followed, Ronan ordered a quiet investigation into Alira's lineage, not out of doubt in his wolf's judgment, but out of a need to understand the woman fate had placed before him. What his advisors uncovered surprised the entire court. Alira's family, it turned out, descended from a once-respected wolf bloodline that had fallen from favor generations earlier, stripped of title and status, after a political dispute long since forgotten by most. Her parents had hidden their heritage, choosing safety and obscurity over the dangers that came with a fallen name. The wolf blood in Alira's veins, thin and untrained though it was, explained the strength she had shown the night of the attack, the instinct that had moved her before thought ever could. For Ronan, the discovery mattered little, beyond confirming what his heart already knew. His wolf had not cared about bloodlines or titles when it first caught her scent. It had recognized something far simpler and far more powerful, her. Still, Alira struggled with the weight of it all. She had spent her whole life believing she was meant to remain unseen, and the idea of standing beside a king, of being seen by an entire kingdom, terrified her more than she cared to admit. She confided this to Ronan one quiet evening, as they walked together along the castle's eastern wall, the sky above them painted in soft shades of violet. "I do not know how to be anything other than invisible," she admitted. "I do not know if I can be what a queen is supposed to be." Ronan stopped walking and turned to face her fully. "I do not need you to be what anyone expects a queen to be," he said. "I need you to be exactly who you already are. That is who my wolf chose. That is who I choose." Something in Alira's chest, something that had been guarded and small for as long as she could remember, began to loosen. The final acknowledgement came at dawn, on a morning when the sky over Blackthorn Hold turned soft shades of gold and rose. Ronan called the court together in the great hall. Nobles and guards and servants alike gathered to hear him speak. Alira stood at his side, her heart pounding, dressed simply, without the finery the court might have expected, because Ronan had insisted she come as herself. He spoke plainly, without the practiced formality the court was used to hearing from him. He told them of the night in his study, of the wolf that had remained silent for years until it finally found what it had been searching for. He told them that titles and bloodlines mattered far less than the truth his instincts had shown him. And then, before the entire hall, he took Alira's hand. "This is Alira Sokolova," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the silent room. "She is the one my wolf has chosen. She will stand beside me, not because of where she comes from, but because of who she is." The hall was silent for a long moment, and then, slowly, the silence broke into murmurs of acceptance, then quiet nods, then something that felt, unmistakably, like respect. Alira looked out at the faces before her, faces that had overlooked her for years without a second glance, now watching her with something entirely new. She felt Ronan's hand tighten gently around hers, steady and sure, and for the first time in her life, she did not feel the urge to disappear. The morning sun rose fully over Blackthorn Hold, spilling gold light through the tall windows of the great hall. Alira Sokolova, once a quiet servant who had learned to be forgotten, stood beside the Alpha King as his chosen mate, no longer invisible, no longer small. She had spent her whole life believing she was meant to remain in the shadows. But dawn had come, and with it, she had finally been seen.